If you can dance this waltz, I'll adopt you. Millionaire mocks black girl, but then. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. The ballroom was dazzling. Every light reflecting off polished marble floors, the clinking of champagne glasses mingling with the soft hum of conversation. Guests in their finest attire moved effortlessly, a perfect picture of wealth and elegance. But amidst the luxury, a small figure stood at the edge of the room, awkwardly clutching the corner of a faded dress. Maya, no more than 11 years old, was out of place in this world of glitter and grandeur. She wasn't supposed to be here. She had simply wandered in, pulled in by the warmth of the room and the sight of the twinkling chandeliers. Her sneakers were worn, her hair untidy, a stark contrast to the perfection around her. The room took notice. Whispers spread like wildfire. Who's this little girl? Does she even belong here? She must be lost. Maya froze. The sound of her heartbeat drowned out the chatter around her. She was just about to turn and leave when a deep voice sliced through the room. If you can dance this waltz, I'll adopt you. The words hung in the air like a challenge, coming from none other than the billionaire, Ronald Whitmore. He stood tall at the center of the room, his piercing gaze fixed on her. The room went silent. All eyes were on Maya. Her heart raced, and for a moment, she thought about running. But something inside her pushed her forward, a spark of courage she couldn't explain. Ronald's lips curled into a smirk. Go ahead, little girl. Prove me wrong. The guests looked on with a mix of curiosity and amusement. Some stifled their laughter. Others whispered to one another, eager to see this girl fail. Maya felt the weight of their eyes on her. But she was used to being underestimated. She stepped forward, her bare feet brushing the cool marble. The music started. A waltz. She didn't know how to dance a waltz. She had never learned, never had the chance. But in that moment, with all those eyes watching her, she felt something shift inside. She wasn't going to back down. Maya closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and moved. The steps weren't perfect. She stumbled at first, but she kept going. Her feet may not have known the steps, but her heart did. As she moved across the floor, something magical happened. The tension in the room faded. The guests who had once whispered now fell silent, watching in awe. Ronald stood still, his eyes locked on her, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't even close. But Maya danced with everything she had, with the kind of grace that came from a place deeper than the surface. She finished, breathless but proud. The room was quiet. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, a slow clap began, tentative at first, before growing into a chorus of applause. Ronald Whitmore didn't clap. He didn't even move. He was still staring at her, his expression unreadable. Well, he said slowly, breaking the silence. I didn't expect that. His voice was softer now, less mocking. But Maya didn't hear the change. She was too busy fighting the lump in her throat, the overwhelming sense of accomplishment. She had done it. She had danced. But what happened next would be even more surprising. Ronald walked toward her. Maya stood there, unsure of what to expect. Would he laugh? Mock her some more? Or was he going to dismiss her like everyone else? Instead, he bent down to her level and said quietly, You've got guts. I'll give you that. You've earned a chance to prove yourself. And with that, everything changed. The room was still buzzing with conversation, but Maya had already made her way to the edge of the dance floor, her hands trembling at her sides. Her heart was still racing from the unexpected challenge, the eyes of the crowd still lingering on her, but she couldn't stop smiling. She had done it. She had danced in front of all those people, despite feeling completely out of place. She was proud, but also uncertain. Her chest swelled with a mix of excitement and fear. What did this mean? What did it mean to her? And what did it mean to the billionaire, Ronald Whitmore? As the applause faded and the room began to return to its usual hum, Maya caught sight of Ronald watching her from across the room. He wasn't clapping like the others, but his gaze was intense, thoughtful. For a moment, she wondered if she had somehow messed up. What if he was regretting his words? What if he was just going to brush it off? She was still standing there, unsure, when he started to walk toward her. His steps were slow, deliberate, and the room seemed to quiet down once again. When he reached her, he didn't say anything at first. Instead, he studied her with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something she couldn't quite place. "You've got guts," he finally said, his voice calm but edged with something deeper. "I didn't expect that." Maya didn't know how to respond. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come out. She was still catching her breath, still trying to process everything that had just happened. Ronald tilted his head, as if considering her, before continuing. "I didn't expect anyone to have the courage to do what you just did. But I suppose I was wrong." His words made her pause, her mind spinning. What did he mean by that? Was this some kind of game to him? Was he just toying with her, like the others had? But then, he surprised her again. "You want a chance, don't you?" he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he was reading her mind. Maya nodded, unsure of where this conversation was going. She had no idea what he was talking about. She only knew that, somehow, she had stepped into a world that felt completely foreign to her. Ronald seemed to pick up on her confusion and offered a slight smile. "I know it must seem strange, but I believe you deserve a chance to show what you're really made of." Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had spent her whole life being told she wasn't good enough, that she didn't belong. And now, this stranger, this powerful billionaire, was offering her something she had never dared to dream of, an opportunity. An opportunity to prove herself. "I'll help you," he continued. "I'll help you get what you need. But you'll have to show me that you're willing to work for it, that you're not afraid of the challenge ahead." Maya blinked, her mind racing. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Ronald stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "I'll give you the chance to prove yourself," he repeated, his voice firm. "But it's not going to be easy. This world isn't easy, especially for someone like you. But if you can handle the pressure, if you can show me that you're strong enough, then we'll see where this goes." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, if she was ready for whatever he was about to ask of her. But one thing was clear, this was her chance. This was her moment to change everything. And she couldn't back down now. "I'm ready," she said, the words surprising even herself as they slipped from her lips. Ronald gave a small nod, his expression softening just slightly. "Good. Then we'll start tomorrow. Meet me at my office, first thing in the morning." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Maya standing there, trying to wrap her head around everything that had just happened. The night continued around her, but for Maya, everything had shifted. She had been offered a chance to change her life, a chance to prove that she was more than just the little girl who didn't belong. But at what cost? She didn't know. All she knew was that she wasn't going to let this moment slip away. She was going to take the opportunity, and whatever came next, she would face it head on. The following morning, Maya stood outside the towering office building, looking up at the gleaming glass structure that seemed to pierce the sky. She had been here before, walking past this building on her way to school, her eyes lingering on the wealth she could never reach. Today, though, it was different. Today, she was about to step inside. Her stomach fluttered nervously, her palms sweating in the crisp morning air. She wasn't sure what to expect, but one thing was clear. This was her chance. Her chance to prove herself. She glanced at the time on her phone, still 15 minutes early. Taking a deep breath, she pulled open the glass doors and stepped into the cool, air-conditioned lobby. It was like stepping into another world, one that smelled of fresh coffee and polished wood, a far cry from the dusty streets she was used to. The receptionist, a young woman with sharp features and a professional smile, looked up from her desk as Maya approached. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but distant. Maya hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say. "I'm here to see Mr. Whitmore," she said quietly, her voice a bit shaky. The receptionist raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Mr. Whitmore?" she repeated, glancing down at the list of appointments. "Do you have an appointment?" Maya nodded, her heart pounding. "Yes. He asked me to meet him this morning." The receptionist still looked skeptical, but gestured to the elevator. "The 24th floor. Just go up and check in with the assistant." Maya nodded, her legs feeling like jelly as she made her way to the elevator. As the doors closed behind her, she felt a wave of panic wash over her. What was she doing here? What if she didn't belong? The elevator moved smoothly, rising higher and higher, until it stopped with a soft ding. The doors opened, revealing a sleek, modern floor with glass walls and polished floors. Maya stepped out, feeling small in the vastness of it all. She was in a world that wasn't hers. She walked down the hallway, trying to act confident, though every step felt like a test. She reached the office door and knocked softly. "Come in," a voice called from the other side. Maya pushed the door open and stepped inside. The office was just as impressive as the rest of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city. Ronald Whitmore was sitting behind a large desk, his back to her as he looked out at the skyline. He turned as she entered, his eyes narrowing slightly as if assessing her. "You're here," he said, his voice low but not unkind. Maya nodded, her heart racing. "Yes, I'm here." Ronald gestured to a chair in front of the desk. "Sit down," he said, and Maya hesitated before walking over and sitting. She was still trying to process everything, still unsure of what to expect. Ronald studied her for a moment, his gaze piercing. "I'm glad you came," he said finally, his voice softening. "Yesterday, you showed me something. Courage. I don't see that much these days." Maya looked at him, unsure of how to respond. "I didn't have much of a choice," she said quietly. "I had to try." Ronald raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You didn't have to try. You could have walked away. But you didn't. And that's why you're here." Maya shifted in her seat, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. She still didn't fully understand what was happening, but somehow, she felt like she was being seen, like she mattered for the first time. Ronald leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "I want to offer you something," he said. "Something real." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ronald looked at her intently. "I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you the chance to prove yourself, to make something of yourself. But first, you need to know that it won't be easy. You'll have to work harder than you've ever worked before. Do you understand?" Maya nodded slowly, trying to wrap her mind around what he was saying. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice steady now. Ronald studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Good. Then we'll begin today." He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city. "You're going to be tested," he continued. "But I'm going to make sure you have everything you need to succeed. I'm giving you an opportunity that most people never get. Don't waste it." Maya stood up too, her heart swelling with determination. "I won't," she said firmly. "I won't waste it." Ronald turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "We'll see," he said, and his voice carried a weight that made Maya's stomach flutter. "I'm giving you a chance, but it's up to you to make something of it." Maya took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment that could change everything. And she wasn't going to let it slip away. She would prove that she was worthy of the chance she'd been given. Whatever came next, she was ready. The next morning, Maya arrived at Ronald Whitmore's office, heart pounding as she stepped into the sleek, modern building. The marble floors and glass walls were nothing like the small, cramped apartment she shared with her mother. This was a world of privilege, one she had only ever seen on TV, and now, she was about to be a part of it. She was nervous, but determination pushed her forward. She had made a promise to herself that she wouldn't let this opportunity slip away. As the elevator doors opened, she stepped out into the hallway and walked toward Ronald's office, the sound of her footsteps echoing against the empty walls. The receptionist gave her a polite smile and directed her to the conference room where Ronald was waiting. Maya knocked lightly on the door before entering. Inside, Ronald was sitting at a large, polished desk, his attention focused on some papers in front of him. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "You made it," he said, nodding toward the chair across from him. Maya sat down, her nerves flaring again as she glanced at the stacks of documents on his desk. She was out of her element, but she was determined not to show it. "I told you we would start today," Ronald said, his voice calm but firm. "You've shown me that you have the guts to face challenges. Now it's time to prove that you have the skills to back it up." Maya nodded, her palms sweating as she sat up straighter. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice steady. Ronald smiled, though it was more of a knowing smile than a reassuring one. "Today, we're going to see how you handle pressure," he said. "You're going to work alongside my team for the next few weeks. I'll give you tasks, challenges, things that will test your limits. But if you prove yourself, we'll take the next step." Maya's heart raced. This was what she had been waiting for, but the pressure was overwhelming. Could she really do this? Could she handle everything he was about to throw at her? She had never been given a chance like this before, and she wasn't going to back down. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm. Ronald's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he were measuring her. "Good. We'll start with something simple," he said, standing up and walking over to a large whiteboard. "I want you to solve this." He wrote a series of complex numbers and equations on the board. Maya stared at the problem. It was nothing like anything she had ever seen before. It wasn't even close to the math she had learned in school. Her stomach tightened as she realized what he was asking her to do. "You've got 5 minutes," Ronald said, folding his arms as he watched her. "Go ahead." Maya stared at the numbers, feeling the weight of the challenge pressing down on her. 5 minutes wasn't long. She had no idea how to solve this, and panic started to rise in her chest. But she couldn't show weakness. She had to prove she was worthy of this chance. Her eyes scanned the numbers again. She remembered a trick from a math tutor her mom had hired when they were struggling with bills. She had always hated math, but something about the simplicity of the method clicked. She grabbed the marker, her hand shaking slightly, and began writing down steps on the board. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to fall into place. She could feel Ronald's eyes on her, but she ignored him, focusing entirely on the problem. It was a matter of confidence now, of trusting her instincts. As she worked, the minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. She erased a mistake and rewrote part of the equation, but she didn't stop. With just seconds to spare, she stepped back and looked at the board. The solution was there. It wasn't perfect, but it was right. Ronald stared at her work, his face expressionless. The silence stretched on, and Maya's heart beat faster. She had no idea if he would be impressed or disappointed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "Well, that wasn't bad," he said, his voice surprisingly approving. Maya let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She had done it. She had solved the problem. "But that was just the warm-up," Ronald added, his smile never reaching his eyes. Maya's stomach churned, but she forced herself to sit up straight, ready for whatever came next. "What's next?" she asked, her voice steady despite the nerves racing through her. Ronald sat back down, a small glint of approval in his eyes. "Next," he said, "we start working with the team. You'll be handling real tasks, not just equations. But I need to know one thing. Are you ready to keep up?" Maya nodded without hesitation. "I'm ready." Ronald studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Then let's begin." He stood up, walked to the door, and opened it, gesturing for Maya to follow. As she stepped into the hallway, Maya felt the weight of what had just happened sink in. She had passed the first test, but she knew this was just the beginning. There were many more challenges to come, and she was ready. She had to be. She wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. No matter how difficult it got, she was going to fight for it. She was going to prove that she belonged here, in this world of privilege and power. The following days blurred together as Maya threw herself into her work. Each morning she arrived at Ronald Whitmore's office, greeted by the polished glass and chrome that symbolized the life she had only dreamed of. The team was large, bustling with people in tailored suits, all speaking in fast, confident voices. They had no idea who she was, what she was, or where she came from. To them, she was just another intern, a curiosity, a challenge. But she wasn't going to be a passing shadow. She was going to prove her worth. Her first real task came that Friday afternoon, when Ronald sat her down at a desk with a stack of paperwork. "This is the real test," he told her. "You need to organize and present the quarterly report to the board. It has to be perfect." The pile in front of her seemed insurmountable. Figures, charts, projections. Maya stared at it for a long moment, her mind racing. She had never dealt with business reports or anything remotely like this before. She had no experience, but she had something else, a hunger to succeed. She dove in, skimming through the data, sorting through numbers that seemed meaningless at first, until they began to make sense. She worked late into the evening, pushing herself harder than she had ever pushed before. The office lights flickered as the hours passed, and she felt the weight of the challenge press down on her. The work was complex, but slowly, she began to see the patterns in the numbers. She realized that this wasn't just about getting the answers right. It was about presenting them in a way that mattered. She had to tell a story with these numbers. By midnight, she had finished her draft. Her hands were sore, her eyes heavy, but the work was done. She printed the report and left it on Ronald's desk before heading out. The next day, Maya entered the office with a mix of excitement and anxiety. She had no idea if her work would be enough, if it would impress anyone. But as soon as she saw Ronald, standing in front of the conference room, looking over the report, her stomach tightened. "Maya," he said, his voice neutral. "Come here." She stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. He didn't say anything at first, just turned the pages of the report. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. Then, he looked up at her, his eyes sharp. "You did this?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore." It's good," he interrupted. "Really good." Maya blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Good," she asked softly. "You did this without any help. You managed to take complex data and present it clearly, concisely. You've got something." His words hung in the air, and Maya's pulse raced. She hadn't expected this. She had expected criticism, judgment, maybe even dismissal. But instead, she was being acknowledged. Ronald set the report down, meeting her gaze. "You've earned my respect," he said. "I'm going to give you more responsibility. This was your first big challenge. But you're not done yet. We're just getting started." Maya didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. She had passed the first real test, but that meant the bar was only going to get higher. She had no time to relax, no time to celebrate. There was more work to be done. But for the first time in her life, she didn't feel out of place in this world. For the first time, she felt like she belonged. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Maya continued to work alongside the team, handling tasks that pushed her to her limits. She stayed up late, learning new things, failing and then succeeding. Each day, she learned more about the company, the people, and herself. And with each new challenge, she became more confident, more certain that she could do this, that she could succeed. But the pressure was always there, lurking. As Maya worked harder, the doubts crept back into her mind. Was this enough? Was she truly capable? Was she just another charity case, someone Ronald had taken in because he felt sorry for her? But whenever the doubts threatened to overwhelm her, she reminded herself of one thing. She wasn't doing this for anyone else. She was doing this for herself. And with that thought, she pushed forward. One morning, about a month into her time at Ronald's company, she received an unexpected call. It was from her mother. Maya hadn't heard from her in weeks. Her heart sank as she answered. "Maya," her mother's voice trembled on the other end of the line. "I need you to come home. It's bad. I don't know how much longer I can." Maya's stomach twisted. She hadn't expected this. Her mother was struggling, her health worsening. She knew her mother needed her, but she couldn't afford to leave now. She had worked too hard to get here. She had to make this work. She took a deep breath and spoke softly into the phone. "I'm coming home, Mom. I promise." But as she ended the call, Maya's heart felt torn. She had worked so hard to get here, but her family still needed her. It was the first real test of her new life, the pull between the world she had entered and the world she had left behind. She couldn't have both, and that realization hit her harder than any of the challenges Ronald had thrown her way. But one thing was clear. Whatever happened, she couldn't give up now. She had worked too hard to come this far. I spent the next several days torn between two worlds. At work, the pressure was mounting, but I was handling it. Every task, every challenge Ronald threw my way, I met head-on. I was learning faster than I ever thought possible, proving to myself, if no one else, that I could do this. But then, there was my mother. Her voice echoed in my mind, desperate, pleading. The situation at home had become dire, and I knew I couldn't put it off much longer. I had to go back, but I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that weighed heavily on my chest. I had come so far in such a short time. The life Ronald had offered me, the life of opportunity, of challenges that I was excelling in, it felt like a dream, and I was afraid of waking up. I had no choice. The day came when I had to return. The tension between my obligations here and my responsibilities at home was unbearable. Ronald noticed my distraction as soon as I entered the office that morning. "Something's bothering you," he said, his sharp gaze piercing through my attempt to hide it. "What's going on?" I hesitated, but I couldn't lie to him anymore. "My mom's sick. She needs me," I said quietly. Ronald's expression softened. For the first time, I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes, a glimpse of the man behind the power. "Go to her," he said simply. "You've earned the time off. We'll manage without you for a few days." His words were kind, but there was something else in his tone, something unspoken. I didn't know if it was compassion or an unspoken challenge. Either way, I wasn't about to argue. I needed to leave. As soon as the day ended, I made the arrangements. The next morning, I was on a plane back home. The familiar sight of the small city I had grown up in brought a rush of emotions. I hadn't realized how much I missed it until I was there again, walking the streets, passing the familiar storefronts. It felt like stepping back in time. But everything had changed. I had changed. When I arrived at my mother's apartment, I was met with the smell of medicine and the faint sound of the TV playing in the background. My mom was lying on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes tired but still full of love. "Maya," she said softly as I walked in. "You came." I knelt beside her, taking her frail hand in mine. "I'm here, Mom. I'm here." Her smile was weak but genuine. "I didn't want to bother you. I know you've got so much going on." I shook my head, my throat tight. "You'll never be a bother, Mom. I'm here for you." Over the next few days, I did everything I could to take care of her. I helped with her medicine, made her meals, and tried to comfort her. But no matter how much I did, there was still that feeling gnawing at me. The life I had started to build, the opportunity one had been given, it was slipping through my fingers. I couldn't help but feel that if I stayed here, I'd be giving up on everything I had worked for. But I couldn't abandon my mother either. The guilt of not being able to be in two places at once was suffocating. One night, after my mom had fallen asleep, I sat by the window, looking out at the quiet streets below. I thought about the life Ronald had shown me, the possibilities that were now within reach. I thought about the work, the challenges, the sense of purpose I had found. I had never felt more alive. But now, in this small apartment, I felt like a part of me was fading away. The next morning, my phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen and saw a message from Ronald. "Maya, I hope everything is okay. If you need more time, take it. But remember, we're counting on you." His words hit me harder than I expected. It was a reminder that I wasn't just part of this world. I was essential. The pressure, the responsibility, I couldn't run from it. I sat there for a long time, unsure of what to do. But I knew one thing. I couldn't stay stuck in this moment forever. My mother needed me, yes. But the world I had entered, the opportunities one had, they also needed me. And somehow, I had to figure out how to balance both. That afternoon, I took my mom's hand and looked into her eyes. "I have to go back, Mom," I said softly. "But I'll be here for you. I'll make sure you're okay." She squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with both concern and understanding. "You're growing up, Maya. I see it. You've got a future ahead of you." It was the first time she had said something like that to me. And for the first time, I truly believed it. I wasn't just someone who had to fight for survival. I was someone who had a future, and I had to seize it. I made the decision then. I would go back, finish what I started with Ronald, and continue proving myself. But I would never forget where I came from. And I would always be there for my mom. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, but I knew it was the right one. As I boarded the plane back to the city, I felt a new sense of clarity. I wasn't just walking two paths. I was creating my own. And I was ready to face whatever came next. After returning to the city, Maya threw herself back into her work with renewed focus. The few days spent with her mother had been draining, emotionally and physically. Her heart was still torn between two worlds, but she knew that she had to push forward. She was determined to make the most of the chance she had been given. Ronald had given her the space she needed, but now it was time to prove herself once again. The first thing Maya noticed upon returning to the office was that things were different. The air felt heavier, charged with something she couldn't quite place. There were murmurs in the hallways, conversations that paused when she entered rooms. Ronald's presence in the office was commanding, but there was a subtle shift. People were no longer just curious about her. They were watching her. She could feel their eyes on her as she moved through the office, and though she tried to ignore it, it was hard to escape the feeling that she was being measured. That morning, as she sat down at her desk, she noticed a folder placed neatly on top of her pile of work. It was marked with her name, but the contents were unfamiliar. She opened it slowly, her heart racing. Inside were detailed reports, some that looked like financial statements, others that seemed to be projections for a new product launch. At the top of the first page was a note from Ronald. "I need you to analyze this and provide a strategy by the end of the day." Maya's stomach dropped. She had no idea how to approach this. The task felt like a mountain. She had only been at this company for a few weeks, and now she was being asked to deliver something so important. She glanced around the office, the pressure mounting. The clock was ticking, and everyone else seemed to be moving with purpose. She was being tested again. Her hand shook slightly as she picked up a pen and started scanning the documents. As she read, her mind raced. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to let herself fail. She wasn't going to be the person who couldn't handle this challenge. As the hours passed, Maya found herself digging deeper into the numbers. She called over a colleague to help explain a few points and spent time comparing the projections with historical data. Slowly, the fog lifted. She could see how all the pieces fit together. It was a puzzle she was starting to solve. By the time the sun began to set outside, Maya was hunched over her desk, her eyes tired but focused. She had put together a strategy that she felt confident about. When the final report was ready, she printed it out and placed it carefully on Ronald's desk. She took a deep breath before knocking on his door. "Come in," Ronald's voice called from the other side. She entered, her heart still racing. He was sitting behind his desk, looking over a set of documents. Without looking up, he gestured for her to sit. "So, what do you have for me?" he asked. Maya handed him the report, her hands clammy. She waited as he flipped through the pages, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched on, and she fought the urge to fidget. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he looked up at her. "This is good," he said. Maya's chest tightened, but she managed a small nod. "You really think so?" she asked, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Ronald smiled, though it was more a small, approving gesture than a wide grin. "Yes," he said firmly. "This is exactly what I needed. You've shown that you can handle the pressure. You've earned my trust." Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't just a passing compliment, it was validation. For the first time since she had walked into this office, she felt like she belonged. Ronald leaned back in his chair, studying her with a slightly softened expression. "I knew you had it in you," he said. "You've come a long way in a short amount of time. Keep this up, and you're going to go far." Maya didn't know what to say. She was still processing the compliment, still riding the high of knowing she had succeeded. But there was something else too, something in the back of her mind that nagged at her. This wasn't over. She had made it this far, but there were still many more challenges to face. She was starting to realize that this wasn't just about proving herself to Ronald or anyone else. It was about proving something to herself. She could handle this. She could do the impossible. As Ronald set the report down, he stood and walked toward the window, looking out at the city below. "There's something else," he said, almost as if to himself. "I've been thinking about what comes next, about where you fit in all of this." Maya's curiosity piqued, but she stayed quiet, waiting for him to continue. "You've shown me that you can handle the day-to-day work, but I'm going to need you to do more. You're ready for a bigger role, and I'm not going to hold you back," Ronald said, turning to face her again. Maya's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The next step. Whatever it was, she was ready. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to back down now. Ronald looked at her with a new kind of intensity. "We're going to push you even further. I'm going to give you more responsibility. You'll be managing projects, working directly with clients. You're going to prove yourself even more." Maya's mind raced. This was what she had been waiting for, what she had been working for. She could feel the weight of it, but it wasn't the kind of pressure that made her want to run. It was the kind of pressure that made her want to rise. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. Ronald's gaze softened slightly. "I know you are." With that, he turned back to his desk, signaling the end of the conversation. Maya stood up, feeling like she had just crossed another threshold. She had passed the test. But this was just the beginning. She wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not ever. The days that followed were both exhilarating and overwhelming for Maya. Her responsibilities at the office were growing by the day. She was now in charge of several projects, her desk cluttered with files, reports, and meetings. Ronald had given her a chance, and now she was expected to prove that she was ready for even more. But with the growing workload came mounting pressure. The energy in the office was more intense than ever. Colleagues who had once regarded her as an outsider were now relying on her expertise. Her phone rang constantly, emails piled up, and each decision she made seemed more critical than the last. As the days passed, Maya started feeling the weight of her new role. The more she achieved, the higher the expectations became. Yet, through it all, she remained focused. She knew what she wanted: success, recognition, a chance to build a future for herself. But there was something else at play, something she had been avoiding for weeks. It was a letter she had received last week from her mother. It had been sitting on her desk, unopened, as she threw herself into work. But now, in the quiet moments before the workday started, Maya found herself staring at the envelope again. The handwriting was familiar, the address familiar. It was from her mother. With a deep breath, she opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in her mother's shaky handwriting. It was a plea for help. Maya's mother was struggling more than she had let on. Her health was deteriorating, and she needed her daughter more than ever. The letter had a final sentence that hit Maya harder than she expected. "Come home, Maya. I can't do this alone anymore." The words echoed in her mind as the room seemed to close in around her. She hadn't realized how much she had been avoiding this moment, this decision. She had tried to bury herself in the work, to ignore the pull of home, of her mother's need for her. But the letter forced her to face the truth. The opportunity at work, the life she had begun to build. Was it worth it if she couldn't balance the people who needed her most? Ronald had been nothing but supportive. He had given her more responsibility and trusted her with high-stakes projects. But the weight of her mother's plea felt heavier than anything else in her life. She had made a promise to herself that she would make this work, but now she was forced to choose. She couldn't ignore her family's needs any longer. With a heavy heart, she stood up from her desk and walked down the hallway to Ronald's office. She knocked lightly before entering. Ronald was standing at the window, looking out over the city, deep in thought. He turned when he heard her approach. "Maya," he said, his voice warm but with an edge of curiosity. "What's going on?" Maya hesitated for a moment, her throat tight. This was it, the moment she had been avoiding. "It's my mom," she said softly. "She's not doing well. I need to go home." Ronald's expression softened, and he walked over to her. He didn't ask any more questions. He didn't need to. "How long will you need?" he asked. Maya blinked, taken aback by how quickly he had understood. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I don't want to leave, but she needs me." Ronald nodded, his gaze steady. "Family comes first," he said. "Take the time you need. We'll figure things out here." Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her, though the decision still weighed heavily on her heart. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ronald gave her a reassuring smile. "Go be with your mother. I'll handle things here." Maya stood there for a moment, unsure of how to express her gratitude. But she didn't need to say anything more. She knew this was the right choice. She had made her mark at the company, and Ronald had given her the space to grow. Now, it was time to go home, to do what she needed to do for her family. As she packed up her things and left the office, she felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, uncertainty. But she also felt something else, a sense of strength she hadn't known she had. She had come a long way since her first day at Ronald's company. She had proven herself capable, and now, she was going to prove that she could balance both the career she was building and the family she loved. The train ride back home felt long and exhausting, but Maya couldn't stop thinking about what she had accomplished. She had made it this far, and she knew that no matter what happened, she would keep moving forward. When she arrived at her mother's apartment, she was greeted with a quiet but warm embrace. Her mom's frailty hit her harder than she expected, and she realized just how much her mother had been holding on for her. "I'm here now, Mom," Maya said softly, squeezing her mother's hand. "I'm not going anywhere." It was a promise, one she knew she would keep. As she settled in to care for her mother, Maya reflected on the journey she had taken, the lessons learned, the sacrifices made, and the growth she had experienced. She knew that the future still held many challenges, but for now, she was exactly where she needed to be. It had been a few weeks since Maya had returned to her mother's side, and though she had thrown herself into caring for her, a lingering feeling of unease remained. Her mother's condition was deteriorating, and while Maya did her best to balance the overwhelming demands of her new responsibilities and the care her mother needed, the strain was beginning to show. The guilt that had settled in her chest after leaving the office gnawed at her. The decision to step away from the life she had started building, despite it being the right one for her family, felt like a weight she could never fully lift. But she knew she couldn't let herself linger in regret. The world of business, of opportunity, was still waiting for her. It wasn't just about proving herself anymore. It was about knowing where she belonged and how she could fit into both her personal and professional lives. One quiet evening, as Maya was sitting by her mother's side, she received a message from Ronald. The text was simple. "How's everything going? When you're ready, we need you back. We're counting on you." His words, though kind, felt like a call to arms. Maya knew what that meant. Ronald had not forgotten about her, and neither had the company. It wasn't a demand, but the expectation was clear. The next day, after settling her mother into a comfortable position, Maya decided it was time. She had come back to help her family, but her future was out there, waiting. She couldn't keep avoiding it. She couldn't ignore the opportunity that had been handed to her. She needed to find a way to do both. With a heavy heart, Maya made the decision to return to the office. Her mother, although weak, nodded with understanding when Maya told her what she planned to do. "I'm proud of you, Maya," her mother said softly, her eyes tired but filled with love. "But don't forget to take care of yourself too." Maya kissed her mother's forehead before leaving, the weight of her decision still heavy, but her resolve clear. Returning to the office felt like stepping into a new chapter. The atmosphere had changed since her absence, but the moment she entered, she felt a surge of familiarity. Her desk was still there, a symbol of the life she had almost left behind. The pace of the office was as fast as ever. The buzz of conversation, the click of keyboards, and the constant hum of activity welcomed her back. But this time, Maya felt different. She felt like she belonged here, not just as an intern, but as someone with something to prove. Ronald's office was exactly where she had left it, polished, modern, and imposing. As she stepped inside, he looked up from his work, his eyes flicking over her, taking in her presence. "Maya," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "You're back." Maya nodded, her heart still racing from the emotional decision she had made. "I'm ready to jump back in," she said, her voice steady, though the weight of everything still pressed on her chest. Ronald didn't say anything at first, but instead, he studied her, as if determining how much she had changed. "Good," he said at last, standing up and walking toward her. "We've got a project that's been waiting for you, if you're up for it." Maya's eyes widened slightly. She wasn't expecting this kind of responsibility, especially after being away for so long. "I'm ready," she said firmly. "What's the project?" Ronald's gaze softened for a moment before he spoke. "It's a big one. A potential merger. I need someone who can think on their feet, who won't back down when things get tough." Maya's mind raced. This was her moment. It wasn't just about doing well anymore. It was about stepping up. She had already proven herself in small ways, but now it was time to show that she could handle something massive. "I'll take it," she said, her voice filled with determination. Ronald gave her a sharp nod, his approval clear. "All right then. I'll have the team bring you up to speed. We need a solid plan, and we need it fast. But I know you've got the chops." Maya could feel the weight of the challenge ahead of her, but she wasn't intimidated. This was what she had been working for. This was what she had sacrificed for. As the days went by, Maya threw herself into the project. She worked late, met with executives, and strategized with the team. Every decision she made felt monumental, but with each one, she grew more confident. She was no longer just the girl from the wrong side of town, trying to make it in a world that felt alien to her. She was Maya, a force to be reckoned with. The more she worked, the more she saw how much potential she had. But it wasn't without challenges. The stakes were high, and the pressure never seemed to ease. The team sometimes doubted her, unsure of her ability to handle such an important project. But Maya pushed forward, answering every challenge with conviction and skill. As the deadline for the merger presentation approached, Maya stood in front of the conference room, her hands slightly trembling, but her mind sharp. She had done everything she could. Now, it was time to present her work. The board members filed in, sitting around the table. Ronald stood at the head of the table, watching her intently. Maya cleared her throat and began. She spoke clearly, confidently, laying out her strategy for the merger and how they could achieve success. Every word was deliberate, every detail carefully thought out. When she finished, the room fell silent. The air was thick with anticipation. Ronald stood, looking over the team's notes before turning to face Maya. "Excellent work," he said, his voice calm but full of approval. "You've exceeded my expectations." Maya's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment she had been working toward. She had done it. She had proven herself. The project was a success, and Maya was no longer just the intern. She was a trusted member of the team. Ronald smiled at her, his approval genuine. You've got a bright future ahead of you, Maya. And this is just the beginning. The weight that had been on her shoulders for so long lifted, and for the first time in a long while, Maya allowed herself to feel the pride of accomplishment. She had made it. And now, she knew that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. As weeks passed, Maya began to settle into her new role at the company. Her confidence had grown, and with each new challenge, she found herself more capable and more trusted by those around her. But while her professional life was thriving, her personal life was still a balancing act. She hadn't returned home in weeks, though she kept in constant contact with her mother. The distance weighed heavily on her, but she knew the sacrifices she had made were starting to pay off. The success of the merger project had cemented her place at the company, and now she was entrusted with even greater responsibilities. Ronald had been pushing her hard, but he was also starting to acknowledge her growing potential. The other executives were taking note, too. She was no longer just a young intern. She had become an indispensable part of the team. However, Maya's life had not yet reached the level of peace she had hoped for. Her mother's health had not improved, and Maya had to come to terms with the fact that she couldn't be everywhere at once. She had made so much progress at the company, but her family still needed her. One morning, after a particularly late night at the office, Maya woke to a call from her mother. The voice on the other end was weak and uncertain. Maya, honey, I don't think I can handle this much longer. I need you. Maya felt her stomach drop. Her mother had never been this vulnerable before. It was a moment that made her realize that no matter how much success she achieved professionally, her family would always come first. She quickly made the decision to take a short break and go home for a while. Ronald had noticed her growing stress in recent weeks. He knew the pressure was mounting. Maya had given so much of herself to the company, but he also saw the toll it was taking on her. When Maya told him about her decision to go home for a while, he nodded, his expression softening. Take the time you need, Maya, he said. We'll hold things down here. Family comes first. You've earned this time. Maya was grateful for his understanding, but she knew she had a choice to make. Her career was progressing in ways she hadn't expected, but her mother needed her more than ever. Her eyes burned with exhaustion as she packed her things, but there was a weight of determination behind her every movement. She wasn't sure what the future would hold, but she knew she had to step back for a while. The train ride back home felt longer than usual. As the cityscape faded behind her, Maya's thoughts turned inward. She couldn't help but wonder whether she was making the right choice. She had worked so hard, sacrificed so much to get here. But in the end, nothing was more important than being there for her mother. When she arrived at her mother's apartment, she found her in bed, looking frail and pale. Maya's heart broke as she walked over and sat beside her mother. I'm here, Mom, Maya said softly, brushing her mother's hair from her face. I'm not going anywhere. The next few days were spent caring for her mother, but also reflecting on her journey. Maya spent long hours at her mother's side, helping with her medication, making her meals, and trying to comfort her. But even as she focused on her mother, her mind kept drifting back to the office. She couldn't stop thinking about what Ronald had said. He had trusted her with so much, and now she was stepping away. It was hard not to feel conflicted, but she also knew this was where she was needed. A few days later, as Maya sat in the living room with her mother, the phone rang. It was Ronald. Maya hesitated before picking it up. She had only been home for a few days, but she felt the weight of her responsibilities pulling at her. Maya, I just wanted to check in, Ronald's voice came through the line. How's everything going? Maya sighed, the exhaustion of the past few days catching up to her. It's been tough, she admitted. But I'm doing what I need to do. Ronald paused before speaking again. I understand, he said, and I hope your mother gets better. But just so you know, things are moving forward here. We've got more projects lined up, and we're ready to have you back whenever you're ready. His words hit her harder than she expected. She had been expecting this. She had known that her absence would leave a gap. But hearing it from Ronald made her realize how much she had truly become a part of the team. She had a responsibility, not just to herself, but to the people who were relying on her. I'll be back soon, she said, her voice more certain than she had felt in days. I promise. Ronald's voice softened. Take care of yourself and your family, Maya. We'll be here when you're ready. After hanging up, Maya felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had made the right choice. She was where she was needed, and that mattered more than anything. A few days later, as her mother showed signs of improvement, Maya started to feel the shift. The weight in her chest began to lift, and she realized that she could strike the balance she had been searching for. She wasn't abandoning her career. She was simply taking a step back to make sure her foundation was solid. The future was still hers to shape, and when the time came, she would return to the company, stronger and more focused than ever. But for now, she was exactly where she needed to be. Maya had returned home after a few days, feeling more at peace with her decision to care for her mother. The days had been long, but as her mother's condition slowly stabilized, Maya began to see a way forward. The pressure of balancing work and family had been overwhelming, but in the quiet of her childhood home, she found clarity. Her mother's strength had always been her anchor, and now, with her mother in a better state, Maya knew it was time to return to the office. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy, but she felt ready. She had proven herself capable, and now, it was time to build on that. After a brief moment of doubt, she made her decision. Maya called Ronald, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm ready to come back," she said, her voice steady. Ronald didn't hesitate. "We'll be waiting for you," he replied, his tone encouraging. "But remember, it's going to be different this time. You've earned your place here, Maya. Let's make the most of it." Maya hung up the phone and took a deep breath. It felt like the beginning of something new. She had been away for weeks, but now, it was time to step into the role she had worked so hard to attain. The next morning, Maya returned to the office. The familiar hum of activity greeted her as she walked through the front doors. Her desk was still there, but it was more than just a workspace. It had become a symbol of the life she had chosen for herself. She was no longer the girl struggling to find her place in a world that seemed too big for her. She was Maya, a valuable member of the team, and she was here to stay. As she entered Ronald's office, he looked up from his paperwork and gave her a slight nod. "You're back," he said simply. Maya smiled. "I am." "Good," he said. "We've got work to do." And with that, the real challenge began. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, presentations, and long hours at her desk. Maya felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but it was a different kind of weight than before. It wasn't the pressure of proving herself anymore. It was the pressure of knowing that the work she was doing mattered. She wasn't just fulfilling a role, she was shaping the future of the company. Ronald had given her more responsibilities, and she had risen to the occasion. But with those responsibilities came difficult decisions. There were moments when she felt the familiar tug of doubt. Was she doing the right thing? Was she giving everything she had to the right place? But every time she questioned herself, she reminded herself of her goal. This was her chance, her moment. She wasn't going to let it slip away. One afternoon, as Maya sat in a meeting discussing an upcoming product launch, she found herself once again facing a challenge that would push her to her limits. The team had hit a roadblock. There was a problem with the product's design, and it threatened to delay the entire launch. The pressure was mounting, and Maya could feel the weight of her team's eyes on her. Ronald had trusted her with this project, and now, she had to find a solution. She stood up, taking a deep breath. "We're not backing down," she said firmly. "We're going to find a way to fix this, and we're going to do it quickly. Let's break this down step by step and come up with a solution." Her voice was steady, but inside, her mind was racing. This was what she had been trained for. This was where she had to shine. For the next few hours, Maya led the team through brainstorming sessions, dissecting every possible solution. She pushed them, challenged them, and refused to let them settle for anything less than perfection. As the clock ticked on, she could feel the tension in the room building. But Maya didn't waver. She had been given the tools, and now it was time to use them. By the end of the day, they had come up with a solution, a design tweak that would solve the problem and allow the launch to move forward on schedule. Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her as she realized they had done it. It wasn't just the solution that mattered. It was the way they had worked together as a team. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She had led her team through the fire and come out stronger on the other side. That night, as she sat at her desk reviewing the final details of the launch plan, Maya allowed herself a small moment of reflection. She had come so far in such a short time. She was no longer just the girl who didn't belong. She was Maya, a woman who had earned her place. And for the first time, she truly believed in her own potential. But even as the feeling of accomplishment settled in, Maya knew that the journey was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more difficult decisions to make. But she was ready. She was no longer just surviving. She was thriving. And nothing was going to stop her now. Maya stood at the conference room window, watching the bustling city below as she took a deep breath. The weight of her responsibilities had never been heavier, and yet, for the first time, she was beginning to feel like she had everything under control. The successful launch of the product was a huge win, but that triumph was quickly followed by a new challenge. This time, it wasn't just about a product or a merger. It was about her future, her place within the company, and the choices that lay ahead. Ronald had always been a quiet force in the background, but recently, his presence had felt more commanding. She knew he was watching her, evaluating every decision she made. She had earned his trust, but now, the stakes were higher. As the days passed, Maya couldn't help but feel a subtle shift in the air. She had seen how much power Ronald wielded, how much influence he had over the people around him, and she had begun to wonder just how much of that power he was willing to share with her. A few days after the product launch, Ronald called her into his office. She stood in front of his desk, waiting for him to speak. "Maya, you've done exceptional work," he said, his voice calm but serious. "But you know that things can't stay this way forever. You've proven yourself capable, and now, we need to talk about what comes next." Maya's heart skipped a beat. What did he mean by what comes next? She had proven herself time and again, and now, it seemed like the next step was within her reach. But was she ready? She had been thrown into a world that was so different from the one she had known, and the pressure to succeed was mounting. But there was something else, something she had started to sense. A deeper connection to the work, to the people around her, and even to Ronald himself. He had given her opportunities that no one else would have, but was that out of genuine belief in her, or something else? "I'm ready," she said, trying to hide the uncertainty in her voice. Ronald studied her for a moment, his sharp gaze weighing her words. "I know you are," he said quietly. "That's why I'm giving you this." He slid a folder across the desk to her. "I've been offered a deal, an expansion project that could change the trajectory of this company. I want you to lead it." Maya stared at the folder, her mind racing. This was it. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. The kind of project that could solidify her place in the company. But it also felt like a test she wasn't sure she was ready for. "You want me to lead it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ronald nodded. "Yes, I trust you to handle it." Maya's mind was spinning. She had come so far, but was she truly ready for this? She had faced so many challenges already, but this was different. This project could make or break her career. There was no going back once she said yes. But despite her fears, Maya knew what she had to do. She had worked too hard to let doubt hold her back now. She took a deep breath and nodded. "I'll do it," she said, the words feeling more confident as they left her lips. Ronald smiled, a rare smile that reached his eyes. "I knew you would. But remember, this won't be easy. There will be setbacks, and you'll have to fight for what you want. But I have no doubt that you can do it." Maya stood up, feeling a surge of determination. She was ready. She had come this far, and now, she was going to prove that she could handle whatever came her way. As she left Ronald's office, the weight of the responsibility settled over her like a heavy cloak. This was the moment that would define her future. She couldn't afford to fail. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and long hours in the office. Maya worked tirelessly, pushing herself harder than ever before. She had to assemble a team, analyze the market, and make decisions that would affect the company's future. The pressure was intense, but Maya was determined to succeed. Every decision felt like it mattered more than the last. She was no longer just an employee. She was a leader, and that came with its own set of challenges. As the project moved forward, Maya found herself facing obstacles she hadn't anticipated. There were disagreements within her team, delays from external partners, and the constant looming fear of failure. But with each setback, she grew stronger. She refused to back down. One night, after a particularly difficult meeting, Maya sat at her desk, staring at the stack of papers in front of her. The weight of the project was starting to feel too heavy, and she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to collapse. She had never felt so alone. But then, she remembered what Ronald had said. This was her chance, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. She took a deep breath and stood up, walking over to the window. She looked out at the city, the lights twinkling below, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of calm. She had made it this far, and she wasn't going to stop now. With renewed determination, Maya returned to her desk and began working again. She spent the next few days crafting a new strategy, one that addressed the concerns of her team while still pushing forward with the project. It wasn't easy, but Maya knew she had the skills to make it work. When the day of the presentation arrived, Maya walked into the conference room with her head held high. She had prepared for this moment, and now it was time to show everyone what she was capable of. As she presented her plan to the board, her confidence grew with every word. She spoke clearly, articulating her vision for the future and how the project would help the company grow. By the end of the presentation, the room was silent. Maya felt a knot in her stomach. Had she done enough? And then, Ronald stood up and began clapping. The rest of the board followed suit, their applause filling the room. "Well done, Maya," Ronald said, his voice full of pride. "You've exceeded my expectations." Maya smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She had done it. She had proven herself. This was just the beginning. The future was hers to shape, and she was ready for whatever came next. Maya stood at her desk, looking over the papers in front of her. The weeks since the presentation had passed in a blur of meetings, emails, and deadlines. She had proven herself once again, but the pressure was mounting. Ronald had placed her in charge of one of the company's most important projects, and the weight of it was starting to feel unbearable. She had expected the challenge, but what she hadn't expected was the increasing resistance from the board members. There were whispers behind closed doors. People who had once been supportive were now questioning her decisions, doubting her abilities. Maya had fought to get where she was, but now it seemed like her success was being threatened from all sides. The long days were starting to take a toll on her. She hadn't seen her mother in weeks, and the phone calls had become less frequent. Maya felt the guilt of not being there for her, but she knew that if she didn't keep going, everything she had worked for could come crashing down. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about her future, her career, and the team who depended on her. She couldn't afford to lose now, but the strain was becoming too much. Maya had always been strong, always able to push through difficult situations. But now, she found herself facing something she wasn't sure she could handle. One late afternoon, she received a call from Ronald. "Maya," he said, his tone more serious than usual, "I need you to meet me. There's something we need to discuss." Her heart skipped a beat. What had gone wrong? Was he finally losing faith in her? She quickly gathered her things and made her way to his office, her mind racing with uncertainty. When she arrived, Ronald was standing by the window, looking out at the city. He turned as she entered, his face unreadable. "Come in, Maya," he said, motioning to the chair in front of his desk. Maya sat down, her stomach in knots. She couldn't read him, and that made everything feel worse. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice shaky. Ronald walked over to his desk and sat down, looking at her carefully. "There are concerns," he said slowly. "People are questioning the direction you're taking with the project. There's pressure from the board to make changes." Maya felt a pang of frustration. This was exactly what she had feared. "What kind of changes?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "They want you to reassess the plan," Ronald said. "Some of the board members feel that you've been too aggressive with the approach. They're worried about the risks involved." Maya clenched her fists, trying to contain the anger that was bubbling up inside her. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and now it felt like everything she had accomplished was being undermined. "I've done everything I can," she said, her voice rising. "I've put in the work. I've built a plan that will take this company to the next level. How can they just turn on me like this?" Ronald leaned back in his chair, his eyes softening. "I understand your frustration," he said. "But you need to understand that this is how business works. People don't always see things the way you do, and sometimes you have to make adjustments to keep the bigger picture in mind." Maya took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She had heard this before. People in power often use their influence to change the course of things. But this time, it felt different. She had invested too much to let it all slip away. "So, what am I supposed to do?" she asked, her voice tight. "What's the next step?" Ronald studied her for a moment before answering. "You need to show them that you're flexible. You need to demonstrate that you can adapt. If you can make the necessary changes, they'll back off." Maya nodded slowly, her mind working through the possibilities. She wasn't ready to give up yet. She had worked too hard for this, and she wasn't going to let anyone take it away from her. "I'll make the changes," she said finally. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this work." Ronald smiled, a faint look of approval in his eyes. "I knew you would. I'm counting on you, Maya. But remember, this isn't just about the company. It's about your growth too. Don't let this situation define you. Use it to push yourself further." Maya stood up, her resolve solidifying. She had a plan, and she was going to make it work. The board might be skeptical, but she was going to show them that she could handle anything they threw her way. As she left Ronald's office, she felt the weight of her responsibilities press down on her. The next few weeks were going to be difficult. She would have to fight harder than ever before. But for the first time in a long time, she felt ready. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to let anyone stand in her way. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was hers to navigate. She was determined to prove that she was more than just a product of her circumstances. She was Maya, and she was going to succeed on her own terms. Maya stood in front of her desk, staring at the changes she had made to the project. The pressure from the board members had been overwhelming, but she had faced it head-on. She had restructured the proposal, tweaked the details, and reassessed every aspect of the plan. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The next few days were going to be crucial. She had made the adjustments, but now she had to present them to the team and the board. Every decision she made, every move she took, would determine the future of the project. But Maya was no longer intimidated. She had grown accustomed to the challenges, and with each one, she had learned to adapt and rise above. Her mind was sharp, her confidence restored, and she was determined to prove once and for all that she could handle whatever came her way. As she sat at her desk reviewing the changes once again, her phone buzzed. It was Ronald. "Maya, come to my office. We need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting this moment, but now that it was here, she felt a nervous flutter in her stomach. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and now she had to deliver. Taking a deep breath, Maya stood up and walked to Ronald's office, her mind racing. When she entered, Ronald was sitting behind his desk, flipping through some papers. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Maya," he said, motioning for her to sit down. "I've gone through the revised plan." Maya sat down, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She had made sure everything was perfect, but she couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. "And?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ronald studied her for a moment before speaking. "It's good, really good, but there are still some things we need to discuss." Maya felt her heart sink. She had expected praise, but there was a hint of doubt in his tone. "What things?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Ronald leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking with hers. "You've done well, Maya, but this is a big project, and we need to be sure. There are risks involved, and we need to be ready for whatever comes our way." Maya nodded. She had known this from the start. Nothing about this project was easy, and there would always be risks. "I understand," she said, "but I'm ready. I've done the research, I've made the changes. We can move forward." Ronald's gaze softened, and he gave a small nod. "I know you're ready," he said, "but there's something else. You're not just leading this project anymore. You're representing the company. The future of this company depends on the decisions you make." The weight of his words hit Maya harder than she expected. She wasn't just working for herself anymore. The pressure wasn't just about getting the job done. It was about the impact it would have on everyone around her. She had come so far, but now, everything seemed even more important. "I won't let you down," she said, her voice steady. Ronald smiled, a hint of pride in his eyes. "I know you won't," he said. "But remember, this is your moment. You've earned it. Don't let anyone take it from you." With those words, Maya felt the pressure build once again. But this time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a challenge she was ready to face. As she left Ronald's office, she felt more determined than ever. This was her moment, and nothing was going to stand in her way. The days leading up to the final presentation were a blur. Maya worked tirelessly, preparing for every possible scenario, making sure that every detail was perfect. The team had rallied behind her, and for the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone. The sense of responsibility had shifted. It wasn't just about proving herself anymore. It was about leading the team to success, showing them that she was more than just a capable leader. She was someone they could trust. When the day of the presentation arrived, Maya was ready. She stood in front of the conference room, her heart pounding in her chest, but her mind clear. She had done everything she could. The project was solid, and she was going to deliver. As she began the presentation, Maya spoke confidently, presenting the new strategy to the board and answering every question with clarity and precision. She had anticipated the concerns, and she addressed them with calm, collected responses. For the first time, she felt truly in control. As the presentation ended and the room fell silent, Maya waited, her heart racing. The board members exchanged looks, and she held her breath. Finally, one of the senior executives spoke up. "This is exactly what we need," he said. "You've proven that you can handle the pressure, and you've delivered a plan that will take us to the next level." A wave of relief washed over Maya. She had done it. She had proven herself. The room erupted into applause, and Maya felt a smile tug at her lips. She had faced the challenge, and she had come out on top. But this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Ronald stood up and walked over to her, his expression one of genuine pride. "Well done, Maya," he said. "You've exceeded all expectations. This is your success." Maya felt a sense of accomplishment, but also something else. She wasn't done. Not yet. There was still so much more to achieve, so much more to prove. But for the first time, she felt like she was on the right path. She had earned her place in this world. And now, she was ready for whatever came next. Maya felt a weight lifting off her shoulders as she walked out of the conference room, the board's applause still echoing in her ears. She had done it. The presentation had been flawless, the new project plan accepted, and the path forward was clear. The room full of skeptics had been convinced, and she could feel the respect she had earned from every corner of the company. But as the adrenaline faded, the exhaustion set in. It had been a long road to get here, and while she had triumphed in front of the board, she knew that there was still much work to be done. The success was not the end, but rather another step in the journey that had only just begun. Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket, interrupting her thoughts. It was Ronald. "Meet me in my office," his text read. She could feel her stomach tighten with a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. She had no idea what he wanted now. She had delivered on the project, but Ronald had always pushed her to do more, to be more. She walked down the hallway to his office, the click of her shoes echoing in the quiet space. She took a deep breath before knocking on the door. Ronald's voice came from inside. "Come in." She opened the door, and there he was, standing by the window, looking out over the city. His back was to her, but as she entered, he turned to face her. "Sit down, Maya," he said, motioning to the chair across from his desk. Maya sat down, waiting for him to speak. His gaze was steady, focused. "You did well today," he said, his voice quiet but full of approval. "I knew you had it in you." Maya nodded, the sense of accomplishment still fresh in her mind. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady but tired. "But this is just the beginning, right?" Ronald's eyes narrowed slightly, as if measuring her. "Exactly," he replied. "You've proven yourself, but now it's time to take it further. We've got another challenge ahead. It's bigger than what you just did, and I'm not going to lie. It's going to require all of your focus and all of your energy, but I believe you can handle it." Maya felt a wave of nervous excitement rush over her. She had thought the last challenge was the big one, but now she understood that this was part of a much larger journey. "What's the next step?" she asked, her voice firm with resolve. Ronald walked over to his desk and picked up a folder. He slid it across the table toward her. "This," he said, as Maya reached for it. "It's a new initiative. We're looking to expand globally. I want you to lead the market analysis and strategic planning for this project. We're looking at entering 3 new markets, and I need someone who can think globally. Someone who understands the big picture." Maya opened the folder and began to scan the contents. Her eyes quickly scanned the market research, the projections, and the risk analysis. It was a massive undertaking, but it was exactly what she had been training for. Her pulse quickened as she began to process the scope of the work ahead. "This is huge," she said, looking up at Ronald. "Are you sure you want me to lead this?" Ronald nodded. "I trust you, Maya. You've earned it. But I need you to start thinking on a bigger scale now. This isn't just about getting the details right. This is about understanding the global market, understanding how these expansions will affect the company's future, and how we can leverage them to secure long-term growth. It's going to be difficult, and there will be setbacks, but I'm confident you can handle it." Maya looked down at the papers in front of her, the gravity of the situation sinking in. She had worked so hard to get here, and now, the stakes were higher than ever. She wasn't just managing a single project anymore. She was shaping the future of the company. "I won't let you down," she said, her voice resolute. Ronald's face softened. "I know you won't. But I want you to understand something. This is more than just business. You'll be making decisions that affect the livelihoods of thousands of people, and how we operate in these new markets will determine our future success. The pressure will be immense, but I think you're ready for it." Maya nodded. She had heard the weight of the words, the responsibility that came with this task, and the trust he was placing in her. She knew that this was a moment that would define her career. She wasn't just taking on another project. She was stepping into a new chapter. "I'm ready," she said again, more firmly this time. "I'll get started right away." Ronald gave a small smile. "Good. Let's make this happen." As she left his office, Maya's mind raced. The challenge ahead was daunting, but it was exactly the kind of opportunity she had always wanted. She had come a long way from the uncertain girl who had walked into the company, unsure of her place. Now, she was a leader, and the world she had once thought was out of reach was within her grasp. She had the skills, the vision, and the drive to make it happen. But she also knew that it would require everything she had. There would be sacrifices, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt. But Maya was no longer afraid. She had earned her place at the table, and now she was ready to take the reins. With a deep breath, she gathered the papers from the folder and walked toward her desk. The road ahead was long, but Maya was no longer looking back. She was focused on the future, and it was a future she was determined to shape. Maya sat at her desk, staring at the project details in front of her. The weight of her responsibilities had never been more overwhelming. She had successfully led the company's market expansion initiative, but with each victory came a new hurdle. She had earned her place as one of the key players in the company, but the pressure was becoming more intense every day. The board was expecting results, and the new markets they had entered demanded constant attention. Maya felt like she was always one step away from being stretched too thin, but the fire inside her drove her to push forward. There were moments of doubt, moments when she questioned whether she was cut out for this level of responsibility. But then, she would remember how far she had come, from a scared girl unsure of her place to a woman who had earned the trust of one of the most powerful executives in the company. She had worked hard for every opportunity that had come her way, and she wasn't about to let it slip through her fingers now. A few days after the board meeting, things began to shift. There were whispers in the office, rumors that made Maya's stomach churn. She had heard talk of a potential merger with another company, a competitor that had been gaining ground in their sector. The thought of merging had always been a sensitive topic. Ronald had never brought it up with her directly, but Maya had seen how the board and upper management had reacted in past discussions. Mergers weren't just about business, they were about power, and Maya could sense that something was brewing. She couldn't shake the feeling that the next big decision was looming. Then, one afternoon, Maya was called into Ronald's office. The tension in the air was thick, and as soon as she sat down across from him, she could tell that something had changed. "Maya, I need you to prepare for something," Ronald began, his voice unusually serious. "We've been in talks with Global Tech for a potential merger. It's a huge deal, and the board wants us to be ready for any eventuality. You'll need to help prepare the analysis and strategy." Maya's heart skipped a beat. A merger? It was the opportunity she had been waiting for, an even bigger step in the company's future, one that could define the course of their industry. But the responsibility was massive, and with it came the potential for failure. "Of course," she said, her voice steady. "What's the timeline?" Ronald leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied her. "I want you to lead this. You're going to be the one to decide whether this merger is worth pursuing. You'll need to assess the financials, the market impact, and the potential risks. This isn't just about numbers. It's about the long-term vision for the company. You've been part of our strategy for the past few months, and now, it's time for you to take the reins." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Leading the merger evaluation? She had managed projects, but this was on another level. It was a make-or-break moment. If she succeeded, it would solidify her position in the company for years to come. If she failed, Maya didn't allow herself to think about failure. "I understand," she said, her voice steady but her heart racing. "I'll get started right away." Ronald nodded, his face showing a rare hint of pride. "I know you'll make the right decision, Maya. This could be the biggest move the company has made in years. But be prepared. The board will be watching you closely. This is more than just a project. It's about the future of the company, and you're the one who will shape it. As she left Ronald's office, Maya's thoughts raced. She knew this would be her biggest challenge yet. She spent the following days buried in data, reviewing financial statements, market reports, and competitor analysis. Every decision felt monumental. The pressure was suffocating, but Maya was used to it by now. She worked tirelessly, sleepless nights spent poring over the details, making sure she was ready for any question, any issue that might come up during the board's decision-making process. She knew that this wasn't just about proving herself anymore. This was about the company's survival. Maya worked alongside her team, holding strategy meetings, asking the tough questions, and challenging their assumptions. She refused to settle for half-baked answers. She was preparing for a battle, and she wasn't going to let anything stand in her way. Finally, the day of the presentation arrived. Maya stood before the board, the weight of their scrutiny heavy on her shoulders. She presented her findings with confidence, laying out the risks and rewards of the potential merger. She knew the stakes were high. If the merger went through, it would change the trajectory of the company forever. But there were risks. There always were. The room was quiet as she finished, her heart pounding in her chest. Then, after a long silence, the first board member spoke. "This is a solid analysis," he said. "But what about the cultural fit? How will our company integrate with global tech as corporate culture?" Maya had anticipated this question. She responded quickly, explaining the steps that would need to be taken to ensure a smooth integration process, highlighting the shared values and synergies between the two companies. The questions kept coming, each one testing her knowledge, her preparation, and her ability to handle the pressure. But with every question, Maya felt herself growing more confident. She wasn't just answering questions, she was shaping the future of the company. When the presentation was over, the board members nodded in approval. "Excellent work, Maya," Ronald said, standing up and shaking her hand. "You've done it. The merger is approved." A wave of relief washed over Maya, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of pride. She had done it. She had led the charge and secured the future of the company. She had proven herself, once again. But as the applause died down, Maya knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of the next chapter, and she was ready for whatever came next. Maya's victory with the merger was still fresh, the buzz of success lingering in the air. She had cemented her place at the company, but as she stepped into the office that day, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The applause from the boardroom had faded, and the weight of responsibility had returned. The success of the merger had been just one step, but it felt like the pressure was only getting heavier. The company was now dealing with the integration phase, and the demands on her were mounting. It wasn't just about doing the work anymore. Now, it was about ensuring that the decisions she made would shape the future of the company, and with that came an overwhelming sense of duty. Every move she made felt like it was being scrutinized. Maya sat at her desk, staring at the growing stack of reports and emails. Her mind was tired, yet her body kept pushing forward. There was always something new to tackle, another problem to solve, and with every solution came a new challenge. She had built a reputation for herself as someone who could handle the pressure, but now, the pressure was wearing her down. She couldn't afford to show any sign of weakness. The team was counting on her to lead them through this new phase of the company's growth. And that's when she noticed the email. It was from an anonymous source, its subject line simple: "Watch your back." Maya's fingers froze on the keyboard. She opened it quickly, scanning the message. It was brief, with a tone that made her skin crawl. "There are people in the company who don't want to see you succeed. They're plotting against you. Be careful." Maya's heart raced as she reread the message. Who would send something like this? Was it a prank? Or was there some truth to it? She shook the thought out of her head. She had worked too hard to get where she was to let a random email shake her confidence. But as she tried to return to her work, the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. Who would want to undermine her? It didn't make sense. But then, the rumors began. She overheard whispers in the halls, strange looks from colleagues who had once been friendly. It was subtle at first, but Maya couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that something wasn't right. The people she had once trusted were suddenly avoiding her, acting distant. She had always been so focused on the work, but now, it felt like there were forces at play that were beyond her control. Maya knew she couldn't let herself be distracted by this. She had worked too hard to get to this point, and she wasn't going to let anything or anyone take it from her. She wasn't the type to back down from a fight, especially when the stakes were this high. But she also couldn't ignore the signs that something was brewing beneath the surface. Over the next few days, Maya kept her head down, continuing her work while carefully observing the dynamics around her. She had become more aware of the conversations happening behind closed doors, the subtle shifts in behavior that hinted at something larger. The pressure she had felt before now felt like a storm cloud hanging over her head, threatening to burst at any moment. It wasn't just the work that was overwhelming her now. It was the feeling that she was fighting a battle on two fronts. One with the company's challenges, and one with the people she thought she could trust. That afternoon, Ronald called her into his office. He was sitting behind his desk, flipping through some papers. When he saw her, he motioned for her to sit. Maya could feel her anxiety rising as she sat down. She had been working nonstop, trying to stay focused on the merger and integration, but now, something in Ronald's eyes told her that something was about to change. "Maya, I want you to know that I've been hearing things," Ronald began, his voice calm but serious. "There's been some talk in the office, some concern about your leadership. People are questioning your approach to the integration process." Maya's stomach dropped. She had expected praise for her work, not this. "What kind of concerns?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Ronald sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not the kind of feedback I like to hear, but you need to be aware of it. There are people who think you're moving too fast, that you're not being careful enough with the changes. They're worried about the risks you're taking." Maya's mind was racing. This wasn't what she had expected. She had worked tirelessly to ensure the merger went smoothly, to make sure the integration was a success. But now, it seemed like the very people she had worked alongside were turning on her. "Who are these people?" she asked, her voice sharp with frustration. Ronald hesitated before answering. "I can't say for sure," he said quietly, "but I want you to know that I believe in you. I know you've made tough decisions, and I know you're doing what's best for the company. But you need to be cautious. The board is watching, and if there's a perception that you're failing, it could affect everything we've worked for." Maya's mind was spinning. She had never felt so exposed. She had fought for this position, and now, it seemed like the very foundation she had built was crumbling beneath her. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I'll handle it," she said, her voice firm. "I won't let them take this from me." Ronald nodded, his expression softening. "I know you won't. Just remember, you're not alone in this. We're in this together." As Maya left his office, she felt the weight of his words settling in her chest. She had worked so hard to get here, but now it felt like she was fighting for her career, her reputation, and everything she had sacrificed. The battle was far from over, but she wasn't going to let it defeat her. She had come too far to back down now. Maya felt the full weight of Ronald's words as she walked back to her desk. The tension in the office had become palpable, and the air felt thick with unspoken challenges. She had never imagined that her position, which had once felt secure, would be called into question so soon. The pressure was higher than ever before, but she couldn't afford to let it break her. She had worked too hard to get here, and the fear of failure would not define her. As the days passed, the whispers in the office only grew louder. More colleagues began to distance themselves from her, their eyes filled with judgment and suspicion. It was as if the very foundation of her professional life was being questioned. Maya had always thrived in the face of adversity, but this felt different. There was a deeper sense of isolation now, one that she couldn't escape. She focused on her work, keeping her head down and pushing forward, but the weight of every decision, every move she made, seemed heavier than ever. Every morning, she woke up with a knot in her stomach, wondering if today would be the day she would face the fallout from the doubts that had been planted. But she couldn't stop now. Ronald had entrusted her with the future of the company, and she wasn't going to back down. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling meeting with the board, Maya returned to her office to find an unexpected visitor waiting for her. It was Susan, one of her colleagues who had been with the company for years. Susan had always been a mentor to Maya, offering advice and guidance when she first started. But now, Maya wasn't sure where she stood with her. "Maya," Susan said, her voice quieter than usual. "Can we talk?" Maya nodded, gesturing for her to sit. "Of course, Susan. What's going on?" Susan hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I know things have been difficult lately," she began. "The board's been putting a lot of pressure on you. and I can see how much it's affecting you. But I want you to know, there are people here who still believe in you." Maya looked at Susan, surprised. "What do you mean?" she asked. Susan leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering. "I've heard the whispers. I know some of the others are starting to question your leadership, but I don't think they understand the full picture. I know how hard you've worked, and I can see the results. You've been making decisions that will benefit this company in the long run. Don't let the doubters get to you." Maya felt a mix of emotions flood through her: relief, gratitude, and a renewed sense of determination. She had needed to hear those words, but they also reminded her of how isolated she had become in the face of the company's growing expectations. "I appreciate that, Susan," she said, her voice tight. "But I'm not sure I can keep doing this. Every decision I make feels like it's under a microscope, and I'm not sure how much longer I can keep fighting." Susan looked at her, her gaze softening. "You're not alone in this, Maya. I know it feels like it, but there are people who believe in you, and you're stronger than you think. You've already proven yourself, and this is just another hurdle to overcome. But if you need help, don't be afraid to ask for it. You don't have to carry this weight by yourself." Maya nodded, taking in Susan's words. She had always been the kind of person to handle things on her own, to carry the burden without asking for help. But maybe it was time to stop pretending that she didn't need support. As Susan stood up to leave, she gave Maya a final look. "We're rooting for you," she said before walking out. Maya sat there for a moment, processing what Susan had said. She had always admired Susan for her wisdom and calm demeanor, and to hear her say that she believed in Maya meant more than she could put into words. For the first time in days, Maya felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't alone. The following days were a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and planning for the company's future. Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose as she worked, driven by the knowledge that she wasn't fighting this battle alone. Slowly, she began to see the fruits of her labor. The team she had assembled for the merger was working seamlessly, and the integration process was moving forward more smoothly than anyone had anticipated. The company was starting to see the benefits of her hard work. But just as things began to fall into place, another obstacle arose. A competitor in the market had caught wind of their expansion plans and was making moves to block the merger. Maya's heart sank as she received the news. This was a setback they hadn't anticipated, and it could derail everything they had worked for. But Maya wasn't about to let it. She called an emergency meeting with her team, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her shoulders. "We've hit a roadblock," she began, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "But this is not the end. We've come too far to let someone else control our fate. We're going to find a way around this, and we're going to keep moving forward." Her team listened intently, their eyes filled with respect. Maya could feel their trust in her, their belief that she would lead them through this. They brainstormed, strategized, and came up with a new approach to counter the competitors' moves. Maya felt the tension lifting as they worked together, each member of the team contributing their ideas, each one more determined than the last. By the end of the day, they had a plan in place. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step forward. As Maya walked back to her office that evening, she felt a surge of pride. She had faced the challenge head-on, and though the road ahead was still uncertain, she knew she had the strength to keep going. She wasn't just fighting for the company anymore. She was fighting for herself, for the future she had worked so hard to build. And she wasn't about to let anyone take that away from her. Maya stood in front of the conference room, her heart pounding. The team had worked tirelessly for weeks, but this was the moment that would define everything. The decision was in the hands of the board, and the fate of the company rested on her shoulders. The merger with Global Tech was not just a business deal. It was a strategic move that would shape the future of the company, and Maya had led the charge. She felt the weight of the responsibility more than ever. As she stepped into the room, her eyes briefly scanned the faces of the board members. They were all seated at the long table, their expressions unreadable. Ronald, who had been her mentor and guide throughout this journey, was at the head of the table, his gaze focused on her. She took a deep breath and began her presentation. The room was quiet, the only sound being the soft rustle of papers as she outlined the key details of the merger, the risks involved, and the potential for growth. Maya had prepared for this moment for months. Every data point, every strategy, every potential outcome had been carefully considered. But even with all her preparation, she couldn't shake the feeling that the stakes were higher than ever. As she spoke, she could see some of the board members nodding, others furrowing their brows in thought. The tension was thick in the air, and Maya pushed through, determined to make her case. This merger, she continued, is not just about expanding our reach. It's about securing our position as a leader in the industry. Global tech offers us the technological edge we've been missing, and with our resources combined, we'll be able to take on the competition in ways we never could alone. She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. I understand that there are risks involved, but every major success requires risk. We've weighed every option, and this merger is the best path forward. I believe in this plan, and I believe in the future it will create for us. The room fell silent again as the board members exchanged glances. Maya's pulse quickened as she waited for their response. Finally, one of the senior members spoke up. Maya, you've made a compelling case, he said, his tone measured. But the question remains. Are we ready for the challenges that come with such a large-scale change? What about the cultural integration between our teams? How will we ensure that our employees align with global tech's way of doing things? Maya had anticipated this concern. She took a deep breath and responded confidently. We've already begun working with the HR teams from both sides to align our values, goals, and processes. Cultural integration will be a priority, and we've already laid out a comprehensive plan to make sure both teams feel heard and valued. We'll provide training, workshops, and regular feedback loops to ensure a smooth transition. She could see the board members listening, considering her response. The questions continued, each one more specific than the last. But Maya answered them all, one by one, with clarity and poise. The hours seemed to stretch on, but she didn't falter. She was in control. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the chairman of the board spoke. Maya, you've shown us that you're not only capable, but that you understand the bigger picture. You've taken on this project with confidence, and the results speak for themselves. I think we're all in agreement. Maya's heart skipped a beat as he paused. We approve the merger. A wave of relief and triumph washed over her. The room erupted in applause, and for the first time in weeks, Maya allowed herself to smile. She had done it. She had led the company through one of its most important decisions, and it had paid off. As the meeting wrapped up, Ronald walked over to her, a proud smile on his face. You did it, he said, his voice low but filled with admiration. I knew you were the right person for this. Maya could barely contain the rush of emotion that hit her all at once. The stress, the pressure, the sleepless nights, it had all been worth it. She had proven to herself, and to everyone else, that she was capable of leading, of making the tough decisions, and of pushing the company forward. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I couldn't have done it without you. Ronald smiled. You've always had it in you, Maya. You just had to believe it. This is just the beginning. Now, you've set the stage for even bigger things. As the applause died down and the board members began to file out of the room, Maya felt a sense of accomplishment that she hadn't felt before. She had faced every challenge head-on, and she had come out on top. But she knew this was just the beginning. The merger was only the first step. There was still so much more to do, and Maya was ready for whatever came next. She had earned her place at the table, and now she would take her seat as a leader. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Maya wasn't afraid. She knew she was ready, and she was determined to keep moving forward, no matter what. Maya stood at the window of her office, looking out at the sprawling city below. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over everything. And for the first time in what felt like years, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. The merger had been finalized, the integration was on track, and the company was moving forward with a new sense of purpose. Her heart swelled with pride as she thought back on everything she had accomplished. It had been a long and difficult journey, one filled with doubt, challenges, and moments of overwhelming pressure. But it had also been a journey of growth, of discovering who she truly was and what she was capable of. She had started at the bottom, unsure of herself, uncertain of her place in this world. But through every challenge, every setback, she had proven to herself and to others that she was capable of so much more. She had fought for her place at the table, and now, she had earned it. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments when she had doubted herself, when she questioned whether she was strong enough to keep going. But she had learned to trust herself, to trust in her abilities, and to push through the toughest times. She had learned that it wasn't the obstacles that defined her, but how she faced them. And now, she was a leader in her own right. Someone who had shaped the future of the company and built something that would stand the test of time. Maya glanced at the clock on the wall, her mind still racing with thoughts of the future. There was so much more to do, so many more challenges to face. But for the first time, she didn't feel overwhelmed by the weight of it all. She felt ready to take on whatever came next. The phone on her desk buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Ronald. "Maya, come to my office. I need to talk to you about something." Maya's heart skipped a beat. What could it be? She quickly made her way to his office, her mind racing. When she entered, Ronald was standing by the window, looking out at the city below. He turned as she walked in, a smile spreading across his face. "Maya," he said, his voice warm. "You've done an incredible job. I'm proud of you." Maya felt a swell of emotion at his words. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with gratitude. "It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it." Ronald nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "I know it hasn't been easy, but you've proven that you have what it takes. And that's why I want to offer you something." Maya's heart raced. What was he offering her? "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Ronald turned to face her, his expression serious. "I want to offer you a leadership position within the company. You've earned it. You've shown that you can handle the pressure, make the tough decisions, and lead a team. I think you're ready for this next step." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had worked so hard for this moment, and now, it was finally here. She had always dreamed of being in a position like this, but now that it was within her reach, she wasn't sure what to say. She started, her words catching. "I don't know what to say." Ronald smiled. "You don't have to say anything right now. I just want you to know that the offer is on the table. Think about it. But know that I believe in you. I always have." Maya stood there for a moment, stunned. She had worked for years to get to this point, and now it felt like everything was coming together. The future was right in front of her, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She knew that she was ready for this. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice steady. "I'll think about it. But I'm ready for whatever comes next." Ronald's smile widened. "I know you are. You've already proven that." As Maya left Ronald's office, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and excitement bubbling up inside her. The journey had been long and challenging, but now, she could see the rewards of her hard work. She had come so far, and now, she was ready to take on even more. There was still so much more to accomplish, so much more to learn. But she was no longer the unsure, uncertain girl who had walked into the company all those months ago. She was a leader, and the world was hers to shape. As she sat down at her desk, Maya reflected on everything she had been through. She had faced challenges that seemed impossible, but she had pushed through them. She had proved to herself, and to everyone around her, that she was capable of great things. And as she looked out the window at the city below, she realized that this was only the beginning. The future was full of possibilities, and she was ready to embrace every single one of them. She had fought hard to get here, but now she understood that it was the journey that mattered. Every step, every decision, every failure, and every victory had shaped her into the person she was today. And that person was unstoppable,